they turned up at the door and they came in and searched me and arrested me in my lounge and then took me off.
Bernie, so great to have you here. I feel like I have lived through this trauma with you over the past few weeks, but you've had an incredible
Because you have.
response to your video today. But let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to the day when your life was turned completely upside down. So I think it was first week of August, and 5 police officers turn up at your house.
Actually, it was a really, really bad day because I'd already spent quite a lot of time working with lots of data experts to try and evidence that what had happened, that I had just copied and pasted something, I hadn't made anything up. And the police turned up in the morning to do some kind of welfare check, but I actually think what they were doing was seeing if I was home. And then a few hours later, they turned up at the door and they came in and searched me and arrested me in my lounge and then took me off.
So you're taken to the local police station and thrown in a cell? Like a murderer, like a terrorist?
I was taken to the police. I was taken to the police station and held for a while in kind of an underground garage type space. And then they took me into a receiving area. It was all concrete. And, you know, you think your brain is going to be able to cope with this. And you think you're a really brave person. And you think, if this ever happens to me, you know, I'll be really able to cope with this. But actually you can't. And your brain just shuts down totally. I could not believe that they'd arrested me. And when they took me to the front area of this, within the police station, the superintendent told me that I was being remanded and I would wait there until tomorrow morning. It was about 4:00 in the afternoon, and I would be there overnight, and they would take me to magistrates in the morning, and I would be remanded in prison until my trial. So I had nothing. I had nothing. I had no bag. They even took my hairband, presumably in case I tried to kill myself with my hairband. I had nothing.
And by this point, we knew that this new Labour administration was trying to make an example of people, the folk who were involved in the so-called riots after the Southport massacre, and the people who were described as quote-unquote keyboard warriors. So I know there was some taunting towards you about the fact that you were going to spend a lot of time in jail, and at this point, presumably, you thought that you were going down for what, 2 or 3 years, like Julie Sweeney or Lucy Connolly or Wayne O'Rourke?
Well, you know, I'm such a big believer in democracy and in justice that I knew that because I was innocent and I hadn't done it, and that I could give them all the evidence I hadn't, that of course they weren't going to arrest me. Of course they weren't, because why would you arrest someone who hasn't actually broken the law? And although I'd seen all of this, I just did not think it would happen in Britain. I just didn't think it would happen. But the more pressure that people on social media put on that post, tagging in the Met Police, there were hundreds and hundreds of people that just wanted me to shut up. I was worried that I would get a visit, but honestly, I thought it would just be a voluntary interview.
The thing that I find so disturbing, Bernie, is that the mainstream media were so desperate to find a scapegoat, weren't they, for what happened after Southport, rather than actually have a genuine reflection, a genuine discussion about why people might be angry, about why there might be unrest on social media. There was a need for a scapegoat. And I guess you felt like at that time a perfect scapegoat because they were able to deride you as all of the things that we're called all the time, conspiracy theorists and anti-vaxxers and lockdown deniers, all of that sort of stuff. They threw all of that up at us. And in your case, what that meant is the media were able to turn you into a villain, and they almost gave the police an easy answer. But I find that so disturbing, Bernie, because the police should not be dictated to by who the mainstream media is telling them to arrest. And certainly they should not be dictated to by who a politician or even a prime minister is telling them who to arrest. But looking back on it now, your arrest and your incarceration was so clearly political.
I think the police were under a huge amount of pressure, and I think that pressure did come from London, without doubt. There was a huge groundswell of, we can't talk about anything else, so it must be someone else's fault. And so the thing that has troubled me, and did trouble me deeply at the time, was how could the media get so much glee out of saying things that they knew would destroy an ordinary person's entire life? Why would they do that? I wasn't the bad guy. And so it seemed to me like I was just a perfect distraction. You know, we can't pick on who did it. We don't want to talk about anything that's happening in the country. We're not allowed to discuss it. So I was the fall guy.
Yeah, let's talk about a model citizen who sent a tweet. And actually, Bernie, I want to read out to you, I don't know if you've seen it, the statement that the police released today, because I found it completely fascinating. This is a spokesman for the police force said, a woman who was arrested in relation to an inaccurate social media post has been released without charge. The 55-year-old woman from near Chester was arrested on Thursday, August the 8th, following allegations in relation to a social media post containing inaccurate information about the identity of the attacker in the Southport murders. Following a thorough investigation, a decision has been made that no further action will be taken due to insufficient evidence. Now, firstly, I hate these bullshit statements that the police release after an example like this, because in fact, they should just say, we got it wrong. She did absolutely nothing wrong. Not that there was insufficient evidence. That's the first thing. The second thing is, it got me thinking, Bernie, one of the reasons that we have become such a target for the deep state is because we have called out lies told in the mainstream media, specifically over Brexit and COVID, and now under this new Labour administration. And just think about the chilling idea that people can be arrested for inaccurate social media posts. Because if that really were the case, then every mainstream journalist virtually operating over the COVID period would have to be arrested for the lies that they told about lockdowns and mandates and vaccines, for example. So this is such a slippery slope, and journalists should be fighting for you, but instead they are on the side of the authorities.
Yeah, I just don't understand that. I'll never understand that, because to me, journalism particularly was about uncovering the truth from Parliament and Westminster and all around the world. And when it's left to other people to find out the truth, because the mainstream media is just printing what the government has asked them to print, I find that completely ridiculous. I mean, you talk about misinformation. The police arrived to arrest Bernie Spofforth, and then when they talked to me at the police desk, it was about riots in Stockport. So they got both of those things wrong. It's easy to do. And like Keir Starmer said, if you make an error and you delete your post, that should be the end of the matter. And it just wasn't. And I don't know how people recover from that. I don't know as a country how we recover from that. Are some people allowed to make errors and are other people not? How do you choose? So the mainstream media are allowed to make errors on a constant basis, including my name, but I'm not allowed to make an error. Why?
Indeed. And the problem is, Bernie, their errors are actually hugely damaging, because if we go right back to those days after Southport, I don't believe for a single second that any social media post caused the unrest that happened on the streets. As you say, it was an easy distraction so that the government could demonize the so-called rioters and the white working class who were utterly furious about mass immigration rather than actually deal with what happened over Southport. But weirdly, the mainstream media have just lapped up this narrative that a couple of rogue pieces of information on social media caused what happened. I don't think that was true at all. If you look back to the day that Keir Starmer went to Southport and was heckled by locals, at that point, everyone knew exactly who the man charged with the crime was. So I think they have lied anyway about the prominence of these social media posts.
But I think that, you know, this government, the previous government, and the previous government have a huge issue outside of Westminster, because if you look at places in the north, there are places in the northwest where year after year after year, children come out of school with no GCSEs, and in some of those towns, you can't even take A levels. So there is no levelling up. There has been no levelling up. They are completely abandoned. No one pays any attention to them. And when they cry for attention, they don't get it. That's it. The only attention that was brought to them were those dreadful riots. And I'm not condoning those riots. I never would. No one in their right mind would. But to say it was because of a tweet or a post, instead of looking behind at the real reasons of total deprivation in those areas, lack of opportunities for young people, lack of opportunities for even older people who've come out of work. There's nothing.
No, I know. But what I think is so shocking, and we have seen this so much develop over the past decade, is that the mainstream media and the establishment work in lockstep now to perpetuate a completely untrue narrative. So in your case, unfortunately, it was this law-abiding businesswoman from Chester who has never put a foot wrong with the law and aggregated some information on social media that turned out to be correct. It's her responsibility. It's her fault. And the media, rather than questioning that, just bought into the narrative because they are lazy and I think they are captured. And it was incredibly disturbing to see. Because, of course, Bernie, this has had a massive impact on you reputationally too, hasn't it?
Yeah, of course it has. So 30 years of your entire career, whatever you ever did, is gone. Because the only thing people will ever remember you for is when they search your name on Google, what the press printed about you comes up. And I found that almost unbearable. I mean, really, I did, Dan. I found that almost unbearable.
How low did you get, Bernie?
Well, you become almost like a zombie. I couldn't talk to anyone. I couldn't leave my house. I was terrified of leaving my house. I had no devices. The police took them all.
But first, digestive issues are caused by a potential toxin that's in all of the, quote, healthy foods that scientists have been telling us to eat, with a fraudulent food pyramid for the longest time. And this potential toxin causes digestive issues. According to Dr. Gundry, a world-renowned cardiologist, this is affecting millions of people nationwide. Warning signs include weight gain and fatigue, digestive discomfort and stiff joints, even skin problems. Well, Dr. Gundry explains these side effects can be manipulated and mistaken for normal signs of aging because digestive issues develop usually over a matter of years and sometimes even decades. I can assure you that the damage is probably caused by these health foods and it's far from normal. The good news is you can easily help fix the problem from your own home. It's very simple. You just have to know which foods are actually healthy and which contain this hidden potential toxin. So you can go find this yourself at gutcleanseprotocol.com/outspoken. That's gutcleanseprotocol.com/outspoken. I've put the link in our show notes on YouTube and Rumble too. Because after years of research, Dr. Gundry has decided to release an informative video to the public, free and uninterrupted, showcasing exactly which foods you need to avoid. Go find that video at gutcleanseprotocol.com/outspoken or click on the link in the description below. But now, back to the show. Of the moment that we are talking about your communication being taken away. So, Bernie, please pick up again. I'm a huge apology.
No, that's okay. I honestly thought it was me because we live in Chester and our internet is a disaster. So I was like, oh no, it's me again.
So you were talking about the fact that the state had taken away your devices. And actually, this is something that I find so chilling, Bernie, given that you are a big critic of the government. And at that point, you were continuing to rail against lots of other things that they were doing. Not that your party political, by the way, I should stress that. You questioned the previous government as well. But they banned you as part of your bail conditions, not only for not having access to your devices, but you were not able to post anything on X.
Well, actually, I think it was worse than that because the exact wording was I could not engage in social media, but that wasn't defined. So that would have meant everything, including WhatsApp, Skype, I don't know, LinkedIn. I've got no idea. So I just had to totally stay away from everything, which meant I couldn't reply to anybody, even really good friends, certainly not on WhatsApp, and I didn't have my devices anyway.
Do you think it was part of a plan to stop others from continuing to criticize and put pressure on the government at a time when they were acutely aware that the unrest and the negativity could have got out of control? Because, Bernie, honestly, after your arrest, I had so many people, including very high-profile politicians, very high-profile columnists, both in the mainstream and independent media, come to me and say genuinely, Dan, I am scared. I don't want to post anything now on X. And they knew it was wrong, Bernie. They knew it was wrong. These are on the whole brave people. But all of a sudden, once someone is arrested and threatened with 3 years of jail, your psychology changes.
But I think you have to balance that, Dan. So, and I do try and be quite balanced. If you have a country that is such a tinderbox, there are riots all over the place, and you don't have enough police to deal with it, you have to try and get some measure of control back. And I can see that a government would do that. And I think the easiest way to do it is probably what they did. Do I think it should continue? And that's the big problem. No, of course it shouldn't. Mao did this in China. You know, we will all follow the same ideology. We will all believe the same thing. And if we don't, we'll have to be re-educated. That can't be allowed to happen. But do I understand why it could have in that instant? Yes, I do.
Do you think that free speech in the UK is under serious threat as a result of this government?
Yes, I do. But I think it was beginning to come under threat from the previous government. You know, in the whole history of mankind, we have never been more connected. It's always been easy for a government to control its population, and it has always done through the television and through the newspaper. But now they can't control it. And that's a problem for them if they're not sharing information. So I know lots of people say they're free speech absolutists, but you know, I fall into the category of free information absolutist, because without balanced and full information, how can you ever discuss anything? How can you vote? How can you have a democracy if you're only sharing part of the information you want people to know? And that's the problem the government's got. It's not so much the free speech, because if you only speak about the things they tell you to, then you're fine. It's the information they won't let us have or discuss that I think is the bigger problem.
And isn't it that why it was so disappointing, Bernie, to see people on the left and your critics, and it was the usual suspect, celebrate your arrest, because that was certainly not my reaction when Novara Media, the hard left platform of Owen Jones, was taken down from YouTube. I immediately stood up for their right to be able to broadcast. And I actually go one step further too, Bernie. I mean, I think it's absolutely terrible that RT, the Russian state propaganda channel, is not able to broadcast in the UK. That may not be a popular view, but we have to know. Putting ourselves in some sort of bubble and pretending that these conversations are not going on actually is short-termist, and it doesn't actually help.
No, it doesn't help at all. And you are just pushing things underground. A democracy must be free to express its views. It must be free to speak about anything it wants to. And you're absolutely right about things like Novara Media. And I think I said that on my video. The saddest thing for me of all of that is you can disagree with people politically. You can hold completely different views to me. But I want to hear your view, because you can help me. You can help me learn. And if you shut down debate, and if you close down questioning, then you have no democracy. And that's the most terrifying thing of all. And I really, really believe what I say. I would have fought for them, and I will fight for them when they are closed down.
Exactly. I have never called on a leftist to be deplatformed, no matter how vile they are to me. Diane Abbott, Carol Vorderman, of course we should hear them, because that's how we realize that they are quite ridiculous in lots of their views. But I think one thing that I've been thinking a lot in terms of you, Bernie, is how disturbing it is that it's the government that has now taken on the role of censor when it was previously big tech. Because, of course, this was not the first time you had been silenced. I remember back in November 2021, you posted against vaccine passports and were removed from Twitter. This is not Elon Musk's free speech X. This is major draconian platform Twitter at that point. And at the time, you came on my former GB News show and you said, if you push people who don't agree with you underground, then that narrative becomes dangerous. You must allow people to speak freely. They must have their opinions and be able to talk about it. If you're censored and pushed down, it's a very dangerous place to be. But what I find so incredible, Bernie, is if you think about what has changed in the 3 years since you abandoned and you gave that interview, Twitter has now transformed into X under Elon Musk. So it is a true free speech platform, much to the horror of two-tier Keir Starmer. And as a result of that, because there is a big tech company who is actually defending our right to free speech and expression, and because they wouldn't censor you, Bernie, the British government decides that they must.
And I think that is the route that we will continue down. I think that, the Online Harms Bill, when it went through the Lords, there were some caveats put in those and some amendments made. I remember seeing the chief exec of Signal saying that part of the original documentation for legislation had included installing malware on all devices who downloaded online apps. So if you want to download Twitter on your phone, malware will be installed and there will be trigger words. And if those trigger words are picked up, then it'll be reported to the authorities, I guess. And I was quite horrified of that. And I think those types of things will come back into play again. So if you want to deal on social media, it will have to be done with your authentic name, and you will probably need a digital ID in order to prove that.
Yeah, it's really chilling stuff. And Bernie, from your perspective, I guess it would have been very easy for you to retire from public life after this. Okay, phew, I avoided jail this time just. I've been through a big trauma. You're a highly successful businesswoman. You're very comfortable in your family and personal life. So what is it that has made you decide, no, I have to be part of this fight. I cannot go underground and I have to be brave?
I actually don't think I was very brave.
Oh, you
I
were.
just knew the end of my story couldn't be that. I couldn't leave that as the end of my story, that I had been brought so low and brought down so cruelly by people who didn't know me and who didn't care, and that it was so wrong. And there are so many other people out there that have been treated even worse than I have. You've talked about them on your show for the last few weeks. I couldn't be silenced for something that was so wrong. And that's obviously why I've come back.
Because, Bernie, I know that what you posted was very different to, say, Wayne O'Rourke or Julie Sweeney or Lucy Connolly. But you must admit that there is a real problem with a society that does not jail men who beat up women, that does not jail paedophiles, but is putting people behind bars for years, based on a fruity opinion that they posted in the heat of the moment on Facebook or X. What is that about? It's
horrendous. It is horrendous. And the justice system in the UK is probably as broken as the NHS. You know, our sentencing is incorrect, our court delays are just absolutely ridiculous, our convictions for rape are appalling. The fact that you can carry a knife and not go to prison, and you could probably be caught 4 or 5 times and still not go to prison, all of that is wrong. And I know that millions of people agree that our justice system is failing. But then for the government to say, oh, the justice system is completely failing, but let's put all our efforts into jailing people who say hurty things on the internet, who you know are never going to do anything, they're just venting. It is unbelievable to me. It's unbelievable to me that people who have domestic abuse, they are violent offenders, have been released early in order to make space in prisons for people like me.
And we are reducing the bar in terms of what incitement to violence is, aren't we? Because every single post that I have read from those folk who are jailed, sure, some of them were unsavory, I've apologized for some of them, they've taken them down. But none of them were actually calling for any specific violence against any individual. It was angry posts. And I think part of it, Bernie, is that people are sick of being lied to by the authorities, being gaslit by the authorities, and having information suppressed by the authorities. Because we put up with that, didn't we, for so many years during the COVID pandemic. We have now had it when it comes to nut zero. We're getting it when it comes to the message of globalist organizations like the World Economic Forum. Don't you worry your pretty little heads. You're not going to own anything, but you'll be happy because we'll make sure you'll be happy. And I really feel like there is a revolt against that approach. Where can we have that revolt? On social media. So what do they try and do? Criminalize free discussion on social media. I find it chilling.
Well, it is, but you can see the pattern. And I mentioned Mao before, and I'll mention Mao again. You know, you are going to tell the population what the narrative is. That's what the population is going to agree with. And when they don't agree with it, you're going to find some measure to stop them. That's exactly what it is, because the next criminalization, if you look at Google and you look at Google's agreement with the UN, and if you look at Google's agreement with the WHO, then misinformation now is also going to cover climate change and net zero. And, you know, I know we do pick at the BBC quite a lot, but let's just talk about the BBC.
A good reason.
The BBC on Bite Size, which is a fantastic educational tool, I cannot knock it. They had on about climate change. They had reasons why it will be a problem, but the benefits of climate change. And the backlash against the benefits of climate change was so huge that they deleted the page. So instead of teaching children in school, this might be bad, but there are benefits to this, they didn't. They took all the benefits away.
So, Bernie, what I love is compared to a few weeks ago, you have your fighting spirit back. You're not going silent. You're now free of the threat hanging over you that you might be spending 3 years in jail. So what is your plan?
You know, actually, I don't feel like that. I honestly believe that the police could knock at the door at any second. I'm terrified to speak. I don't know what to say on social media. I'm not even sure what I'm allowed to say. And I don't know how long that's going to take. I know that sounds really pathetic. I know all of you are laughing at me, but I honestly do feel like that. I've never felt this awful in my entire life. So I guess you need to get back on the bike and stop pedaling.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please do subscribe if you want lots more clips and interviews like that. Plus, if you want to watch our totally uncensored after show, then visit www.outspoken.live.